Start things off tonight with a report from the president of the board. I want to start by just taking a moment of silent reflection in honor of the victims in our own community and victims in Las Vegas of the recent shootings, and to honor them and give everybody some time. Thank you. It's been a difficult week, I know, for our community in that regard. Second item I wanted to address actually has to do with the letter that was reported on by the paper over the weekend about the school district's request to the City of Lawrence to waive building permit fees on our bond projects. In an effort to be good stewards of our bond dollars, we approached the City of Lawrence requesting that the city waive 50% of the building permit fees to be charged for our upcoming bond projects from our bond issue that was approved in May 2017. The amount of the waiver requested was $90,000. We made this same request as to our 2013 bond projects, which was granted by the city. I want to be clear about three things. First, this was not a request to waive any of the requirements related to city inspections of our construction projects. We have been fully involved in working with the city on site and building inspections since September 2015, and we've made no request and have no intention to request any variance to that process. Our request did not mention this at all, and I'm somewhat disappointed that the assumption was made by the media and otherwise without taking time to contact myself or Dr. Stubblefield for clarification before that was out there in an article and then in an editorial on Sunday. Second, we did fully budget for the permit fees in our $87.5 million bond budget. Absent the city's approval of our request, we would be fully able to pay the total estimated permit fee of $180,000. Third, this type of request is common in public projects, and in the past it was granted. I want to point out that the city waives fees and provides millions of dollars in incentives to corporations and developers, a case in point being the NRA request that's before us tonight, which was approved by the City Commission last week and represents a property tax abatement and a sales tax savings of approximately $1.3 million to a private developer. The school district, in making our waiver request, was simply seeking to have the same consideration for the district and for local taxpayers in the treatment of this substantial economic investment in our community that is allowed for businesses and developers. Moreover, if the city were to grant our request, those permit fees that were saved would be put right back into our school upgrade projects, thus allowing us to spend more money to directly benefit our students. Given the city's initial response to our request, I today sent a letter to the city manager and the mayor saying that we have decided not to pursue this matter any further. We do hope that we can work together on these issues in the future in a more positive spirit of cooperation. Wanted to share a couple of events. September 26th, I attended the ribbon cutting at the Peaslee Tech for our new automotive education space there. It's fantastic, it's very exciting. And want to say thank you to our community partners, particularly the auto dealers who helped pledge funds and made that space become a reality for our schools and our students this year. On October 2nd, which was a week ago Monday, I attended the KASB Fall Region 1 regional meeting, had some informative presentations from the Leavenworth School District on their communication strategies, which included the fact that they do a student internship program in their communications department, and they have a student-run district podcast that they are producing this year, which was a really neat project to hear about. We also heard from Baser Linwood on development of their CTE building and program. They built a new CTE building and had visited our building and CAPS, the CAPS program in Blue Valley, as models of how to make that work. And we also had an extensive update from KASB staff on the Gannon decision, which was released that afternoon, and so heard their analysis of what the court ordered. I also, this past Friday, attended a Kansas Open Meetings and Kansas Open Records Act training that was given by the Kansas Attorney General's office in Topeka. There was a lot of great information on general, not just specific to school districts, but just in general on compliance with open meetings and open records requirements under the state statute. And they have slides from that presentation that are publicly available. If any board members are interested, I would be glad to forward you the link to those slides. Just let me know. And that is all I have. So we'll move on to the report of the Superintendent of Schools.
Good evening. Thank you to staff, students, and parents and community members who completed the surveys and/or attended a focus group or public forum last week as part of the superintendent search. The search firm completed all of the input, will compile all of the input for sharing with the board on a special meeting on Thursday, October 19th. We encourage families to walk to school together on Wednesday. All of our walk to school day activities were rescheduled for Wednesday due to weather last week. And speaking of walking to school, the Lawrence Safe Routes to School recently was awarded a $394,000 transportation alternative grant, and the city would match that with $98,500. And the plan is to make more sidewalk improvements and to have more flashing beacons at crosswalks where there's no crossing guards. So congratulations to the Lawrence Safe Routes to School. The district is fortunate to be partnering with Boys and Girls Club of Lawrence, which has received one of the 40 Kansas Leadership Center Leadership Transformation Grants. The grant provides 40 slots, 20, the district will receive 20, and the Boys and Girls Club will receive 20 at a value of $25,000 to attend the KLC Core Leadership Training Programs in 2018. We also have formalized memorandum of understanding for our partnership with the Midwest and Plains Equity Assistance Center. This agreement outlines goals, objectives, and deliverables related to receiving their guidance, assistance, and resources towards accomplishing our equity goals. I want to alert the public to a major road closure north of the former Wakarusa Valley School. East 100 Road will be closed for construction for the next 3 to 4 weeks. Weather permitting, there is a 30 to 50-minute detour for anyone trying to access Lawrence Virtual School. I appreciate LVS staff being flexible and creative in planning alternative locations for face-to-face meetings with students and families for the next month or so. This is just a reminder, there's no school Friday for all students pre-K through 12th grade due to elementary teacher plan day, middle school and high school professional development and recording and reporting of student progress, and middle school and high school classified staff district professional development day. Middle and high school parent-teacher conferences are next week. Please follow up with your school to see the exact schedule. And next week, the board will have lunch at Quail Run at noon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stubblefield. Okay, next item is patron commentary. We don't have any this evening. Okay, we'll move on to board commentary. Vanessa?
Yeah, I just wanted to report that the Board Policy Committee met today. That is comprised of myself, Shannon Kimball, and Dave Cunningham. We talked a little bit about the MOU with the city regarding safe routes to schools. So that was in the city attorney's office for a while. It's been kind of lobbed back to our committee, and we plan to discuss that and send recommendations back to them. So that is still in process. And then we also talked about the LGBTQ plus guidance document that has run through a number of committees lately, and that we'll hear about later tonight. So just wanted to update you about that.
Thank you, Vanessa. Other board members? Rick?
Sure. So Shannon asked us actually to kind of share some of the things that we do that are outside this meeting. So between this meeting and last, I was really pleased to be able to go to 2 school lunches at Pinckney and South Middle School. I had not gotten a chance to see Pinckney before the remodel, and it is almost unrecognizable. And I hadn't met the principal there either yet, so it was good to meet her as well as the principal at South. The kids there were really enthusiastic about the kind of things they've been assigned to do. Also visited with the Lawrence High School Site Council to share with them some information and data about why we're at least thinking about, talking about changing school start times, moving them back. So I did share those data as well as some new information that just came out by the RAND Corporation that suggested if we moved high school and middle school times back to 8:30, we could save or add $83 billion to the economy over a period of 10 years. And that's primarily due to increased academic performance and graduation rates that are associated with actually getting adequate sleep. So that was my week.
Thank you, Rick. And Marcelli?
Yeah, I want to report on the facility committee, which is composed of myself, Shannon Kimball, Kyle Hayden, and Tony Barron. We met last Thursday, and we received an update on the bond implementation. It's all the design teams have formulated, and they're getting ready to start essentially early schematic design, getting all the committees together. And having those initial meetings. Part of that will consist of doing some sustainability and wellness aspects. They're going to have a workshop on that in the, not this coming week, but the week after, to kind of get that rolling, making sure that that's a component of this process. And also thinking forward, how does that integrate for long term as we think down the road when we want to actually develop a more holistic program for the district as a whole. Let's see, what else do we have? The facilities and operations is also the new site that design process is proceeding as well. We have, I think, targeted occupancy of the warehouse June 1st at this point, and the office then would be July 1st, though that's tentative at this point. Schedules can change, but so far that's proceeding well. That's basically all I have for that, unless you want to have anything you want to throw into that.
I think you covered it all, so thank you very much.
You want me to go ahead and talk about there's one other thing I was going to add. Recently, for those that probably are familiar with the Heartland Institute, a conservative think tank out of Chicago, in the last month, they sent out 250,000 copies of a booklet and DVD to teachers across the U.S., essentially trying to question the science underlying climate change. It was a fairly slick product, pretty good piece of propaganda for those that aren't familiar with climate change. I could see how that might lead them to question it. It's essentially creating the sense of false equivalency and debate among scientists that don't actually exist. So it's it's just important that we are aware of I'm not too worried about our district, but there are other places in the state and around the country where the political climate is such that certain teachers may feel pressured to at least avoid teaching that, and so this type of material just adds to that pressure. So it's important for us to speak out when we see that. And so I wrote an op-ed piece for the Kansas City Star on it for anybody that's interested and wants to take a look at it.
And I did read it, and it was a great piece, and thank you for sharing about that. It was great to have a very thoughtful understanding of exactly what the terms of that non-debate really are. So I appreciate that. Other board members have?
Oh, I had the opportunity, my first fringe benefit meeting, it was on September 27th, and basically went over what it entailed, and was reported that the online enrollment that they did went well and almost so smooth it seemed too easy. A lot of the staff was like, "Is that it? Is that it? That's all we have to do." And then they talked about the labs that come to the different sites, whether we need more or less, and just some different alternatives that you can to do, such as Skype sessions or phone calls, and just making sure that employees are aware of the fringe benefit advocate, PEG, and making sure staff know that she's available to be used and ask questions. So,
Great. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? Awesome. All right. Obviously, we have lots of committed board members who do a lot of things outside of the Monday night meetings, and so I'm really glad that we can share a little bit more about what we're all involved in and what we're doing. So Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are those that are considered routine and are adopted by one motion unless any board member or the superintendent requests that an item be removed. The item or items removed are voted on separately. And this evening, am going to ask that we removed item number 1, the neighborhood revitalization area request for 815 Vermont. We're going to place, and we would place that on the agenda immediately before the reports as an item of new business this evening for discussion. So with that item removed, we have some retirements to recognize.
So we have several retirements to recognize tonight, many of which are early retirements. And so I would like to thank the following people for their many years of service to our public school systems. Len Alego, Leslie Ballard, Janet Bates, Victoria Beals, Kay Becker, Joyce Bell, Janice Fullerton, Marcia Herstreiser, Michelle Jacobson, Margaret Mary Magzuga, Pamela Mitchell, Rhonda Morrison, Allison Nye, Kathleen Scallon, Lee Ellen Toole, Aaron Van Seal, Dirk Wedd, Linda Wedge, Martha Wenzel, Shannon Wilson, and Anna DeLahey. Thank you again for your service to our schools.
Thank you very much, Jessica. Okay, with that, could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second?
Harmon,
Yes.
Ingram,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Kimball,
Yes.
Sandburn,
Yes.
Beeson,
Yes.
Fincher.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so we will move on to our new business item, which is the neighborhood revitalization area request for 815 Vermont. And let me find the board enclosure. Dr. Stubblefield, it lists you as the person on the agenda item. I understand that we do have staff here from the city this evening and the applicant. So I know board members had a number of questions about this. Would you like to have city staff speak to the request first for a few minutes, or would you like to just have them come up and respond to questions? And Jill is our representative on the park. Actually, do you want to go first and kind of?
Yeah, I just thought
share?
I'd say a few things. I am the representative from the board on the Public Incentive Review Committee, and just to give you a little background on this project, and I'm sure you probably already know from reading the paper, this project was initially presented to the City Commission in December of 2006 and was sent back with some requests for revision. At the same time, the Public Incentive Committee was going through revising of their own standards, kind of relooking at how to judge a project and maybe get a little bit more clear on that. They completed that process, and the new requirements were also approved by the City Commission after that. Recently, this project was brought back through the process after the guidelines were updated. The project, and I'm sure Britt will hone in on this, but the project did meet all of the new criteria that was set in place by both the Public Incentive Committee and the City Commission. For that reason, it did go through, did pass. I think we all received an email saying why would the school board support tax abatement for this project? And I guess I just felt like I needed to speak to this since I was in the meeting. I guess I would say a couple keynotes. Any tax abatement, this project was awarded a, I'm going to say 10-year, 75% tax abatement. As of right now, the land is maybe worth $500,000 unimproved. It was submitted under the Neighborhood Revitalization Act, which means this is a piece of land that could be improved. It adds density to downtown, and it actually adds to our tax base. So even though we are abating 75% of the tax value, that's tax value that wouldn't be there if this project had not been approved. The estimated tax value, and I hope I'm not trying to be real exact with these numbers because I don't have the information in front of me, but was around $9 million. So right now the tax base is the land is being taxed as land, which is a different tax percentage, and it will be improved to a $9 million project, at which point we will still receive 25% in improvement in our tax base. So in that sense, it does help the school district because it widens our tax base when it's complete. And then also adding density downtown, and it also added an affordable housing unit. So those were all requirements that were set forth by the new city commission, and it did meet all the guidelines, so it was passed. So I don't know that, I hope it didn't add more confusion, but that was just kind of a recap of what was presented in the meeting. So.
Let's do this. I invite Britt Crumcano and Diane Stoddard from the city to come up, and if you would like to add to that or clarify any of that, that would be really helpful.
Oh, I guess I should say too, and I'm sure that people have read in the paper, it did say, it was reported in the committee that the top floor is going to be a residence of the project owner, but that actually has been taken out of the equation and will not receive any abatements and will not receive any perks. So I didn't add that.
Good evening, school board members and superintendent. Britt Crumcano, I'm the City Economic Development Coordinator. I'm just going to kind of talk a little bit high level in terms of what an NRA is. The NRA is a Neighborhood Revitalization Area Act that the state allows communities to use for revitalization projects. And it is not to, it's not specifically to generate jobs, it's to revitalize an area. It's to take maybe what is considered unproductive property and turn it into productive use. So that's the purpose of an NRA. The way the NRA works is it's a rebate program. The base taxes, or what the taxing jurisdictions are getting on the value that the property currently brings in, is shielded from the rebate. You still get that. The new property owner, even after it's developed, still has to pay that base tax. As you can imagine, it's relatively small because those are 2 vacant lots, so there's no improvements on them. Then the NRA is a rebate on the incremental increase in property value due to those improvements. So you have your base, you have your increment, the rebate is only on the increment. And as Jill said, with this particular request, unless you're rebating back 100%, usually that increase that the taxing jurisdictions are still retaining, which the 25%, are so significantly higher than what the undeveloped property would generate that economically it ends up benefiting everybody who participates in the NRA if the project moves forward. The city, the county, and the school district, each individual get to decide their own participation in this, which is why we're on your agenda this evening. And the other thing I guess I should really focus in on is this is on project-generated tax revenues. The rebate's only given on that particular project only if it generates additional tax revenues. So there's no property tax that's being pulled out of other properties. There's no revenues being pulled out of other buckets, if you will, that have been budgeted. This is strictly, it's called a pay-as-you-go, and it is strictly a reimbursement of public improvements that are generated based on the revenues that that property brings in. So given that, it's a little hard economically to kind of, to not, to dispute the numbers because, again, a vacant property is going to generate hardly anything. I believe the total with all the taxing jurisdictions is $7,200 a year in property tax. And I normally don't break this out. I normally do it as an aggregate to all the taxing jurisdictions. So just for example, I'm going to give you the aggregate, and then I'm also going to give you the school districts because I utilized the school districts' mill levies to kind of figure out what projected taxes would be. So for year one, for all the taxing jurisdictions, if the property is undeveloped, it's about $7,200 in taxing revenues that come in and have to be split between all of our taxing jurisdictions. If the property is developed, according to what the applicant has suggested, the total tax bill is $151,800 and some. And of that, the net new taxing revenues to the taxing jurisdictions are $54,000. $90,000 is rebated back to the applicant for the first year on that 75%, and $7,200 is retained by the taxing jurisdictions as their base. If you look at that over time, and you look at these projections over time, over the 10-year incentive period that this property would be under, the base taxes that this would generate if it wasn't developed is about $72,000. If you look at it over a 15-year period, because after the incentive period is over, then the entire amount goes back on the tax rolls. So basically, you're getting a moderate, pretty decent return in the short term. You're getting a really good return in the long term when the NRA rebate goes off. So over the long term, base taxes, well, let me back up. Years 1 through 10, base taxes, $7,200 versus $609,000. The difference is $538,000. Again, we're talking aggregate now. Over a 15-year, just to kind of give you some idea of what happens after that 5-year, after the 10-year tax period expires, keeping in mind that most property has a much longer life than 15 years. But just looking 5 years beyond the incentive period, base tax is $107,500. Incremental tax, $1.6 million. Difference of about $1.48 million. So again, it's in the long run that the payoff comes in terms of growing the tax base. For just the school district, and keep in mind we did also take out the capital outlay and mill levy for these projections. Year one, the portion of base tax that the school district normally would get is about $2,900. Net new incremental tax as a result of property improvements would be about $25,000. Taxes rebated would be about $33,800. So your total tax base is $61,800 and some dollars. If you look at that over time, during the incentive period, base tax is about $29,000. Net new incremental tax is $283,000. Difference of about $253,000 during the incentive period. 5 years beyond that, your total base tax would be $43,800, and your net new incremental tax would be $684,600. The difference is about $641,000. So if the property develops, you can see that there's a significant difference in the property tax revenues that each taxing jurisdiction would realize.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions for you, Britt. I think the first one is, when you're talking about the school district's mill levy and the portion of it that we have as compared to the city and the county, do you calculate the abatement on the 20 mil statewide levy?
Yes, because that is subject to the NRA rebate.
It is, okay.
Mm-hmm. The only one that now is not subject to an NRA rebate is the capital outlay,
Okay,
and that's why it was excluded,
okay,
because of the new legislation.
okay. And that was in the change in the school finance formula this past year, right? Okay. All right, so a second question I have is, in this instance where the building will eventually be sold to a number of different owners, who applies for the rebate? Is there a single applicant, or is it each condo owner has to apply for their own portion of the rebate going forward?
We will only be able to give the rebate back to the property owner. So if a condo has been sold to a particular property owner, the check would be written to the property owner.
Okay.
It would be up to the applicant in terms of if he has a mechanism to collect those rebates. But as far as the city and the county goes, they calculate the rebate, we issue the check to the property owner. So each individual property owner for the condos, I think there's going to be 11 or 12 of them, will have to submit an application, with the exception of the personal residence of the applicant, because that has also been,
That's what Jill mentioned, it's been excluded from.
right, that has been
this.
excluded. So if the applicant chooses to live in one of those condos, that condo would not be subject to the rebate.
Okay. All right. I think the last question I have is based on things I've read about this. I'm not understanding the affordable housing requirement. That's a new thing that is part of the policy since I last served on the PERT.
Right.
And so my understanding of it is that the new policy has a 10% requirement for projects of 4 to 50 units, and then it's 15% if it's more than 50 units.
That is according to the new policy. Now, on July 11th of this year, the City Commission accepted this reconsideration of this project. At that time, they did vote that because this project was submitted before the new policy was in place, they would allow the applicant to continue with the same affordable housing unit. At the time the applicant first applied, there was no requirement for an affordable housing unit. And he had suggested to this set aside. So they had decided at their July 11th meeting to go ahead and allow that.
Okay. It did raise for me a real question about the city's policy, which came up in the paperwork for this. So if they had not granted that exception because this project had fallen before the policy was in place, and you had a project like this that came, and it's 12 units, one of them is going to be affordable housing, that doesn't meet the city's 10% requirement, but then if you make them up that, it exceeds the requirement for a 50-unit.
It's a matter of rounding, and probably PERC and the City Commission are going to have to decide that. I believe with this applicant, it was 1.2
Right.
of a unit, which if you would use the traditional rounding, you would round down. It's going to be really up to PERC and the City Commission to.
So is that a policy discussion that's going to happen? Because it does then make it difficult when something like this comes to us and there's conflicting. We do get feedback from constituents saying, this didn't follow the policy from their perspective at the city. And I'm not saying that that's the case based on what you said, but there's that perception, and then we're asked to vote on this, and there's the perception that we're being asked to vote on something that didn't follow the policy in the first place. So that kind of is a difficult place to be. So it would be nice if the policy could explicitly address that. So in the
There
future,
are plans for the policy to be tweaked.
Okay. Okay.
At the time, that was not something that,
I know it's
I
new.
guess we didn't
Right.
realize that rounding was going to be such an issue.
Okay. All right. Other board members, questions? Okay. No? Okay, great.
I guess just a comment, not a question. You kind of alluded to it, the position that we get put in as a board. And it's not even just for this particular issue, it's just in general when we're asked to vote on these. And we're not involved in any of the, we do have a representative on the PERC that does help, but in general, we don't have the level of detail and knowledge that the city and the commissioners and the county commissioners even have relative to some of the aspects and the nuances to this. We get a report the day of or the day before, and we have to review and make a decision. And so I don't know if this is something we want to address in a future joint session and how if we can smooth this process out a little bit, but it's awkward.
It is awkward. And, the city did ask us for some feedback regarding the plan to collapse the PERC with the JEDC and remove the city commissioners from from PERC, basically. And so one of the pieces of feedback that the district is giving is that, this is one of the few, it's the only one I can think of, where we are appointed to sit on a body along with, with county, right now, city and county commissioners to work jointly on this sort of thing. And removing one of the three bodies of government from that body, I think, misses an opportunity to have these discussions about how do we make this process work better for all three of the bodies that are involved. So it is awkward. I had a long conversation with a constituent today, asking, I think he emailed everybody, but specifically asking us not to approve this. And the rub for that person was that they just don't believe the economic development, the but-for analysis. So that was another question I had. I looked through the materials on this project. Was there a but-for analysis on this project? But for the incentive, it won't go forward?
Basically, that was done by a consultant. That's National Development Council. I don't know if you've had a chance to meet Tom Jackson, but the city has contracted his services for the last year and also for the next coming year. So he does what is called a gap analysis, basically identifying the need that needs to be made up and whether it is reasonable or whether it's maybe over compensating. So I'm going to take a look at his spreadsheet and basically give you an idea of his conclusions. The internal rate of return, and that's, I don't know if you're all familiar with internal rate of return, but that's usually the number that developers are looking at for their bottom line. That's their go or no go. If it meets what they need as far as an IRR, they go.
And that's also what the banks look like in terms.
And the banks also look at that as well.
Financing their projects.
And if they're trying to also get investor equity, other stockholders into the project, they're also looking at that IRR. So the IRR is basically critical when it comes to that perspective. So with Tom's analysis, with the NRA and the IRB incentives, he is estimating an internal rate of return of 7.43%. He says this is very, very tight. He would normally expect 8 to 10% for this type of project.
So in other words, yes, but for the
Yes,
incentives,
yeah.
it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I happen to know that the applicant is not taking a fee, nor most developers will take some kind of a development fee to help pay for their time when it comes to managing and developing the project. And had he put that in, the gap would have been even larger.
Okay. Right.
I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll move that the Board of Education approve participation in the request by Vermont LLC for the establishment of a neighborhood revitalization area at the same level as the City of Lawrence, a 10-year, 75% neighborhood revitalization area for the Vermont Place project at 800 to 815 Vermont Street.
I'll second.
All right.
Ingram,
Yes.
Johnson,
I wasn't here for everything. Can we skip me?
Kimball,
Yes.
Canburn,
Yes.
Beeson,
Yes.
Fincher,
Yes.
Carmen.
Yes.
Passes 6-1, 6-1.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to our reports for this evening. Our first report is on Learning Forward, Future Ready with Jerry Kimball, Assistant Superintendent of Leading Learning and Technology.
Good evening. It's going to take a village to give this report, but we would like to give you an overview of Learning Forward, Future Ready. As you know, it strives to prepare our students for with 21st century skills so that they are ready to live in a global society. As with any initiative, Learning Forward, Future Ready has its technical and adaptive issues that we needed to address this year. The technical issues usually are the easiest, but if they were not addressed, Learning Forward Future Ready would not be as successful as it has been so far this year. So our IT department rolled out 4,000 MacBooks, upgraded the Wi-Fi in both high schools, and I have to thank you very much for that. That has made a huge difference for us. Equipped the classes with Apple TVs, and we continue to offer 400 Khajiit hotspots to check out at our 2 high schools and 4 middle schools. I also want to commend you on that. You are really blazing the trail with digital equity. It's something that is going to face school districts not only nationally, but globally with more curriculum coming online. This is an area that's going to be a very hot topic, and you are well ahead of the curve, and I thank you for that. We've had several opportunities to tell our story, and I'm so proud to be able to tell what we're doing for students here in our district. So tonight, basically, you're going to hear from our 3 directors. They're going to let you know what's happening at the elementary, middle, and high school. You're also going to hear from Ellen Willits. It's going to talk about the actual rollout. Kirsten Wondra is going to visit with you about our professional development, which is a very key to the success of Learning Forward Future Ready. And finally, you commissioned Alltech last fall to look at our rollout at the middle school, the iPad initiative, and so they're going to give you a report on what they found through their research. So we're going to begin with Ellen.
Good evening. I want to just quickly share with you the actual rollout of those 4,000 devices, which was a coordinated and collaborative event with both building and district staff. Apple suggested that we set aside 2 days for each of those buildings because we were rolling out approximately 1,500 to 1,700 devices at each of those 2. The building administrators, the English language arts teachers all worked together to determine a process for the students to come out of those classrooms, come down and pick up their devices. The library media assistants, the library specialists, my 4 instructional material resource people in the team back there, all were there posed with scanners and ready to go. All the devices had tags on them. We were able to scan them in very quickly. IT was there to be able to support anyone who had any kind of an issue. I was fortunate that my friends here from the district admin were there to also volunteer and help us so that the flow continued. As I said, Apple told us that it would take us 2 days. We were able to check out and provide all of their ancillaries to those kids, about 250 to 280 of them in a matter of 20 minutes, which allowed adequate time for the team of IT to go into those classrooms and support them completely. We finished both of the buildings within a day. Wow. Yeah, it was phenomenal.
That's great work. Thank you.
Kirsten Wondra, Assistant Director, Learning and Technology. So a little bit about professional development. I'll give you kind of the potpourri of the things that we're offering this year. Obviously, we started the year off with our August 11th back-to-school training. We had Apple On Site providing a host of Vanguard training specific to our high school populations, in addition to a lot of other sessions that were provided just to go into our normal professional learning. Thanks to you, we were allowed to upstaff the learning coach presence at all of the levels, and so I know the directors will speak to kind of what that looks like at the specific levels that they support. We also were able to bring on a technology integration specialist coach at the high school level and a halftime at the elementary level, and again, they will speak to kind of how they're specifically used, but that's helped with a lot of the job embedded components. We have our asynchronous platform. It previously, they always like to rebrand. Atomic Learning is now Who Knew It, and that's a resource that we continue to pay for that staff can go in there and get those right there ready questions answered, in addition to, of course, YouTube. We have micro-credential offerings, Bloomboard and Microsoft, and getting their Google Level 1, 2 certifications and their Apple certification is one that staff can access, but then we've got a lot of staff that are taking the different credentialing that you can do through. We've got a lot of PD topics designed to connect the content pedagogy and that rich instructional technology. We have the Vanguard teams that we've connected with Apple that are K-12 and they're not just specific to Apple products, which is nice. They'll speak to the host of things that teachers have at their readiness. They'll talk about Nearpod if they need to get the kids connected with the content they need. Additionally, we've got the tech integration support specialist, Joe Smizer, who's predominantly providing the Wednesday afternoon drop-in sessions. So we've got those every Wednesday. Staff can come in and learn about G Suite and any particular questions they might have with our move away from Blackboard. And then we are also offering for buildings, they can sign up for monthly tech cafes where the team will come and just answer building questions and provide PD on an ongoing basis as buildings deem appropriate. Kind of the potpourri we've got going. Thank you.
Thank you.
I love to be the bearer of great news, and that's what I have tonight. Every elementary classroom has been outfitted with a complement of technology devices this year, which has allowed us to create a more equitable experience for all of our little ones at every elementary school across the district. So thank you very much. Teachers have and will continue to receive professional development on how to better utilize those devices and maximize the learning experience for all of our little ones as we continue to cog our way up that SAMR ladder that's so relevant and important. Our special education, ESL, art, and music classes all have 10 devices as well. And as of tomorrow, our PE teachers will be receiving 5 iPads in very sturdy boxes for them to use in their classrooms also. And lastly, we have formally explored Seesaw and provided that opportunity at every elementary building in the district. And Seesaw is an engaging platform for our students, and it's an interactive tool for our teachers and our parents. And cheers were heard throughout the district when it was announced that it would be provided for every elementary school at every grade level, because it just further levels that playing field for our students. And if you remember last spring when the Sunset Hill kindergartners came and presented their China-U.S. global project to you, Seesaw is the platform by which that came to fruition. So now we have that exposure for all of our kids everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jennifer Besselow, Director of Middle School Supports, and we're the lucky ones who are in year 2 of implementation with our one-to-one iPads. And so a couple hurrahs I wanted to share. We were really excited when our principals came to us knowing that we had the rollout of the Macs, and we only have limited personnel for rollout, and they said, we want to do it by ourselves. We've got this. So we were really excited to say, okay, you know, your tech resources might be at the high schools, and they did it, and there wasn't any issues. And they said, there's no reason why we can't do it that way again. I was at West, for example, and utilizing student tech teams, which are now embedded in all 4 middle schools. It was really exciting to see students take a leadership component in the checkout of the devices as well. And they take that job very seriously in those leadership roles. So that was a positive. Couple other things. We did, as Kirsten mentioned, modified our approach to the Vanguard teams, which is a train-the-trainer model. And at middle school, we knew that we could do a little bit better in terms of utilizing those resources. So in conjunction with our Apple train, Jerry and Kirsten, we actually changed that to a one-to-one push-in teacher planning component, and that's starting to really gain some speed. So rather than teachers come out of the classroom, sit and have subs, which is an added expense, we actually have the Apple trainer partnering with our increased learning coach positions, and then they are coming into the classroom one-on-one. So we're really telling our teachers, if you want this service, you actually have 2 extra heads in your classroom helping to plan, and it's content specific. So instead of asking teachers to just come up with some ideas or see what sticks to their content, we're really actually providing a different customer service component, and they can actually bring their real life lesson plans to the table for continued discussion. So that part's been an exciting feature. Additionally, we also are partnering with our Nearpod folks, and that's been an added component to another resource for our middle schools. And so as far as a realistic component of something that we want to continue to work on is just giving time and teachers opportunities to kind of play around and see how that embeds in their current resources, whether that's Blackboard, Google Classroom. And so I think at this point in implementation, I know you like to hear kind of our realistic stretch goals. We're now starting to look at content-specific uses, and we're looking at just time and opportunities to play. But if you walk in our middle schools right now, you'd see our use of iPads is probably more of a daily piece. We're also maximizing efficiency in how we're utilizing it for testing. We had one school, you do all their fall map testing, and they knocked it out in an hour and a half. Entire school, bandwidth held up. It was phenomenal. So gone are the days where we're asking a counselor to push a cart, and we're just wasting just a lot of time and resources. So we're providing a lot of bang for our buck in different ways. But our next steps is just meet the teachers where they are and continue to build capacity with some new tools out there. Thanks.
Thank you.
I have to echo what Ellen said about the rollout. It was incredible. When I first took this position, one of the first things I found out was that, in one day in August after school starts, we're going to roll out about 1,600 MacBooks at Free State, and we're going to do it also at Lawrence High. I thought, okay, let's do this. And it was, I've been trying to think of a single hitch. There wasn't a hitch. By the time it was over, IT, IRC, and all the rest of us were already talking about what does this look like for next year. Like the middle schools rolled out their iPads without much assistance at all, and that's what we hope to do next year at the high schools. Jerry mentioned digital equity, and we had the pleasure of hosting another district here today who is in one of the 7 districts in the redesign project of the state, and they came to see some of the things that we're doing, and Jerry really drove home the point of digital equity. And I feel like with the MacBook rollout, we have really taken huge steps towards digital equity in our district. Every student has the same device, supported by Kajits for students who don't have internet access at home. It's really been amazing to see, and the rollout was a great start. I've never seen so many smiling faces at the beginning of the school year. The kids were awesome. I would echo what Darcy and Jen have said about the Apple Vanguard teams. We're doing similar things at the high schools. It's kind of a grassroots effort of training where the Apple trainers come in and train individual teachers and also the learning coaches at the high school, excuse me, who can then support teachers after the Apple trainers are no longer with us. Also, I would like to mention, Jennifer also mentioned Nearpod. It's a great application to create interactive lessons and PD and other events. I've seen it used for PD already. Some of our administrators using it. I think that's incredible. Great use of it. There are libraries of CCRS aligned lessons vetted with best practice features. It's an incredibly easy on-ramp for our teachers to move into the world of technology integration into delivering content. Really happy with it. I would also say, as Jennifer did, one of our challenges is going to be training and getting everybody the amount of time that they need to really get up to speed, or at least as fast as they want to be going right now. It's been really, really fun and engaging for me. The result, and I saw it as recently as today visiting a classroom, I see students more engaged. It's just my observation. I don't have any data to back it up, but I see students engaged. I see groups of students working together in common areas in the school. I'm in classrooms and I see the teachers, a lot of teachers, using technology in ways that they hadn't before. And we're early in the game, so I can't wait to see what the future holds. But anyway, thank you. I know the high schools would express their thank you to you as well for your support of this project.
Thank you.
We have data to show you. It requires display.
Hey, I'm Jana Craig Harris. This is Amber Rowland, and we're with Alltech, which is a division of the Center for Research on Learning. And as Jerry mentioned, last year you commissioned us to go out and look, be the outside evaluators, and look at what's really going on with the iPad implementation at the middle school. So where Rick said he doesn't have data, we have the data for middle school. This is really exciting. So with that, we did go through and we used surveys, so teachers answered surveys. We had focus groups, and then we also had classroom observations. And through that, some of the overall findings that we had, where there was a potential impact for the iPads to truly transform the learning environment. So that was a very positive thing that we were seeing. We did see a high use of student iPads, and I know that's a really great thing to report on, just because if you have this investment in technology, you want kids using it. So yes, they were really using it a lot. There was a high percentage of teacher engagement. As Rick mentioned, in the high school, teachers really get involved and working with students both one-on-one and then also in groups. And then there's evidence of the personalized learning component. So things like flexible learning environments, things that the district is really supporting for personalized learning for students. We did see that in the middle school level with the iPads. There's also a lot of opportunities for future professional development. So we want to jump in just real quick and kind of look at some of the data a little bit. This is the survey results, first looking at the teachers' attitudes, and the teachers were very positive. They are very supportive that technology, particularly the iPads, can be a teaching and learning tool. So what we have here is that 37% said that it was essential to the success for students in their classroom, and 52% said that it's very useful for them. Only 10% reported that it was optional, and no one reported that it was not. That this is not going to help in my classroom at all. So that was very good. One of the things when we started working with the district leadership and building leadership, they really wanted to know, is this making a difference? Are teachers having to spend more time on preparation and planning your classroom lessons? The bottom line on that, which is that bottom marker there, preparing classroom lessons, activities, and assignments, yes, they are spending either about the same or more time on that. But the payoff is in those top 4 starred items up there, that students are collaborating more on projects in class, they're completing assignments in class, they're practicing content, and they're accessing content. So those go way up. So the trade-off on that is probably an okay, that yes, it may take a little bit more time, but it always does with new curriculum and new resources, but the payoff is in the students and their access and being able to do things.
Can I ask a quick question about that? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So is that, I don't know how many of these assessments you've done, but is that typically an upfront cost in that first year of implementation, and then it ends up, like they have the lesson plans and so they can use them again? So we don't expect to see that again for the following years? Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And, teachers are still going to continue to tweak and
sure,
research and things like that. So they are going to put more time into it, but they're more comfortable with the technology, so that's going to take a little bit less time than what we might see in a first year of implementation.
And will you be continuing, I'm sorry, I don't know, like, are you continuing to kind of look at this again next year, or is your assessment over at the end of this year? Do we know?
This part of it is over, but we are willing to continue to work with the middle schools. So if that's data that would be important. And
We had not talked about it formally, but that is something that we can
I
look
wasn't
into.
sure if it was part of the contract already, but yeah, I mean, I do think it's interesting to know if this is significantly impacting workload, and if that is continuing to be a concern or a problem, or if the workload was significantly impacted that first implementation year, and then if it is, I mean, I assume it could potentially have positive impacts in the future, but okay, thanks. I will let you go to the next slide now.
Okay, so then looking at this one, this is using the iPads to foster student engagement. And the things that we're seeing here are things where the authenticity, the collaboration, and cooperative learning pieces, and the choice, so choice and voice for students. We're seeing that happening a lot more. So the activities and things that would support student engagement are being done more in the classroom. And then specifically, the teachers reported that iPads are being used for students completing assignments, accessing digital readings, so their digital textbook online, research, and creating or producing products. So those are the highest rated ones when we asked them what they use the iPads for. And then this leads us into the observations. So we like to have the self-report data, but we also like to go in there, and this is the most fun part of our job, is being in the classroom and really seeing this in action. When we're in there, we use a momentary time sampling, and we're looking at the 5 elements up there on the top: the technology use, the student learning spaces, teacher engagement, and cognitive activities. We look at that every 30 seconds. But then as an overview, we're also looking at the SAMR and personalized learning components. And that graph there is the student technology use. Is there on the left side. Almost 75% of the time students were observed using technology when we were in those classrooms. And then looking at what the students and what the teachers are doing, on this one, 33.69% of students were working independently. So the iPad was there, they were just working on their own on the iPad. But then 30%, so that's over 60%, they're using their iPads either working independently or working in groups or pairs. And this is in contrast to direct instruction, the teacher lecturing in the classroom. So we're seeing the students working and the personalized learning aspects of it more than lecture activities in the classroom. And then we're also seeing the teachers facilitating the independent or group help. So the teachers aren't just saying, here's your device, go work. The teachers are actually moving around and working with the students one-on-one and offering additional assistance. Looking at the cognitive activities, this is related to Bloom's, so Bloom's taxonomy. So that lower level there is the remembering, that's kind of just receiving knowledge. We see that happening a little bit, but all your higher level activities, understanding and applying and being able to analyze and evaluate things, we see those happening more in the classrooms than what we do for the basic memorization of things. And that's really where it gets to that depth of knowledge and really being able to understand and apply this information. We also saw instances of creating, where kids were creating new products and processes. And then final, that overview, looking at SAMR. Most of the stuff on SAMR is still below the line, so that's that trying to get teachers to teach above the line for modification, use the technology for things that you couldn't just do with paper and pencil, like a substitution area. So we're getting there in this first year of implementation. This is a really good overview, and this is also just a snapshot. This is what we saw on the one day that we were in the classroom for that one class period of that one lesson. So this is just a snapshot of what we saw. It may be different on any other day we would visit.
And guys, real quick, what point during the year did you do this?
I'm sorry,
At what point during the year did you do the observation?
This was in the spring semester. So right after testing, because we didn't want to see kids just taking tests for the state assessment. So after testing, so there were a few more projects and things going on. But then again, if you would go throughout the year, you see different things happening in the classroom. And then the components of personalized learning that we see were the flexible learning environment, the increased access to materials that they're getting online, student voice and choice, students communicating and collaborating more often. The one down there at the bottom, that students tracking and monitoring their own progress, that's the one that, I probably restate this with several different school districts, that they're calling it, and this is with the Hattie research, they're calling it assessment capable students, of students who know where they're at and know what they need to do to get to that next point. And that's the piece I would say technology can make a big impact if they're keeping their data notebooks, and that's a really big factor on student achievement and has the potential to really increase student achievement. So that's the area that I would say we need to work on that piece. So with that,
and then I actually get the fun part. I get to do the focus groups. We have a debate about which is more fun, but I get to go in and I got to talk to students, parents, and teachers at all 4 middle schools for about 30 to 45 minutes. Some of the parents, we went an hour. It was awesome. But what I'll start with are the teacher focus groups. I got the most out of that one. The number one request was more technology support in-house for the initial rollout, which you've already heard how that was addressed, I think, in this last year. And then more job-alike professional learning, which also is a big initiative that's happening. So teachers want the opportunity to get together with people who teach the same thing they do and figure out how they're doing it. And so that was a big part that I know is being addressed as well. So these are just a couple of quotes from the teachers. We tried to give both sides, teachers wanting a little bit more support in-house, and I think they're getting that now, as well as this notion of the students really like it and the teachers notice how the students are enjoying their time. So then the student focus groups also technical in nature as well, that airdrop concerns, the devices have like arbitrary numbers and letters, and so the kids never know who local students in all 4 schools. And their requests were pretty much technical in nature as well, that airdrop concerns, the devices have like arbitrary numbers and letters, and so the kids never know who's dropping what. And so that was something I think that's been looked at, as well as the students really want the teachers to be able to have the ability to prove videos. So what happens is a video, a teacher finds it on their machine, it works great, but then the student would get it and they couldn't access it, it would drive them bonkers. And so that was, again, something that's being addressed. So both sides of the coin, but wanted you to see both sides. And then the last thing was the parent focus groups. The parents also voiced concerns about the filters. I know I've talked to Jerry a lot about this, and she said if the parents know the name of the filter, we have an issue. So yeah, securely, you all probably know it too, if you have children in the district. So they just wanted a little bit more access than less, but we all understand why securely is in place as well. So it's a give and a take, depending on the parents that you talk to. So just the parents also said, dropping some of those filters may be helpful. But not all parents feel that way, but most parents were actually really excited about the iPads and excited to have their kids learning with them, understanding that that's what it takes to have really good digital citizens, and that we're preparing them for that.
While we get to do this fun research and the evaluation pieces of it, it's more important for us on how it's actually going to get used. So we really want this information to go back to the schools and be utilized for them for program improvements and to make changes. So with that,
Well, we just definitely appreciate just different voices and folks coming into our buildings that maybe our teachers and stakeholder groups would feel more comfortable just sharing maybe concerns or things that we could do better. So the so what factor, we've got some excellent data. We've shared this already in a teaching and learning meeting with Jerry and myself and Kirsten with all of our principals. So they are being provided an electronic copy to go back and share it with their buildings. So examples of who they're sharing it with is their building leadership teams. Some are choosing to share it with all staff, site councils, and just be really open about the data. But I think there's a lot to celebrate as well, because teachers really were taking on a pretty big project in that it changed the way that they teach. No longer can they do just a lot of direct instruction. So that element of control is kind of a scary thing when we're adopting a new electronic device. So I'm really impressed with what our teachers gave up, and they're leaning into the data shared about how much time that they have already put in just to really invest in their the quality of what they're delivering to their students. So with that, we'd like to focus a little bit on pushing those cognitive levels up. So when you look about that SAM-R model, we don't want to be sitting in that substitution or augmentation. So we don't want it to be the next $600 pencil. And I know that was a concern the board had in terms of implementation. I think there is some cool content creation going on, and our teachers are feeling a little bit more comfortable with what that looks like. But I also want to give kudos to even the philosophy when it was rolled out. I would even credit the board as we didn't adopt one way of doing anything at the middle schools or one platform to use or one way of using one app. So teachers felt, I think, a sense of autonomy in terms of finding resources that can push out digitally that work for them. So with that, that's been a little bit of a challenge from the professional development level to reach all those teachers at one time. So we want to also take on some of the responsibility as a district to make sure that we're giving them those opportunities. And like the results that came out, just time to play. So when we were redesigning some professional development this year for our November 10th, one of our focuses is just a deeper dive into some of whether it's trauma-informed care or Nearpod or some of the devices that or resources we're putting out there, not only giving them the tools, but giving them time to play and leave with something that they can turn around and implement. So we respect quite a bit what the teachers have taken on from a pedagogy side as well as a technological side, because they've been having to troubleshoot some pieces as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Board have questions for any of our presenters? I just want to say it's really great to get an update and see how positively this is impact. I particularly appreciate that we've gathered data to give us, something to share with our community about the positive impacts.
I did have one question just about, I know we had an awful lot of anxiety as a board about sufficient keyboards, because I think we're all old and we all like to type this way with the home row. And I guess I'm curious, I know we had some in every middle school, like just usage, and do we have sufficient? And when they take their state assessments, are they actually using them or not? And could you just give me some information about
Jennifer, you're probably the best poised to answer that, just coming out of
Sure.
school last year. So we'll let you.
So it's been interesting because we know we put the money into so many at each level, and at first they were like hotcakes, always wanting to be reserved, and now they're just sitting in a lot of our libraries. But I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. One of the comments that has come back is, well, gosh, we thought that they'd always be reserved, so we stopped trying. And so when we pull the analytics, or we go and run and talk to librarians, even last year, they've been sitting there. So I think there's some adaptive workarounds because a potential mindset that they're not available, or we're also getting over that hurdle of we didn't buy a lot because we don't want to waste some resources. So to be completely honest, there's a little of both going on. I wouldn't say we're 100% there with students really composing a lot with the iPads, but I'm really impressed with what they are able to type on. So to be honest, we have a little of both, and it's something we can come back around and ask them. But if you check out the literal checkout data, they're not being used a whole lot. So.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much to everyone. Appreciate it. All right, our final report for the evening, the LGBTQ plus advisory group update with David Cunningham, Executive Director of Human Resources and Chief Legal Counsel. Our agenda lists Kevin Harrell.
Kevin's actually at a conference for Power School.
So it looks like we have Jose Canseco and Mark Pruitt. Thank you.
So Jose is going to give you some background, then Mark's going to visit, and I'm just going to sit here.
Thank you.
Jose Cornejo.
Cornejo, I'm sorry. I knew I said that wrong. And
Canseco was a baseball player.
Yes. My apologies, Jose.
That's
I'm
all
so
right.
sorry.
Jose Cornejo, the district mental health facilitator, and I just want to thank you for this time and share with you the work that the LGBTQ plus advisor group has worked on since February of this year. The group members were Mark Pruitt, Steve Hefferon from Free State, Monty Westfall from Lawrence Virtual High School, Christian Ryan from Southwest Middle School, Howard Dyken from Sunflower Elementary School, Danica Moore from District, Julie Heatwell, Elementary Counselor at Sunflower, Deb Carey, Counselor at Liberty Memorial Central Middle School, Arla Jones, a teacher at South Middle School, Lindsay Buck, a teacher at Lawrence High, and Vanessa Sanburn and Kevin Harrell, Dave Cunningham, and myself were the advisory group. My task was to bring this group together and to look at guidelines to support our LGBTQ plus students, as well as all of our students in Lawrence Public Schools, to create a safe and inclusive environment for our students. And we asked the committee to look at domains that we could write some guidelines on that would help our administration as well as our teachers and staff in the district address the needs of our students in Lawrence Public Schools from kindergarten all the way through grade 12. And with that, the advisory group looked at resources from across the country. We leaned on Minnesota School District that had some guidelines in place. We looked at Gleason. We looked at Topeka School District, Lamba Legal, as well as some of the PFLAG national organizations on advice on how we can support our students and create safe environments so that our students can learn in environments and feel safe at any of our buildings in the district. And so Mark's going to go over these domains with you and what went into some of the domains and possibly some of the conversations that we had as a advisory group.
So in terms of process, we began with people sharing a lot of research. So we entered into the conversation with a basic understanding of current research that was out there and quickly determined that we didn't need to reinvent the wheel, that there were some resources available and we tweaked them to fit Lawrence Public Schools. So as Jose said, we leaned heavily on the Minneapolis district for the template that you see before you, encompassing many of those areas. So the topics were already sort of fairly constructed with minimal edits. The USD 497 expectations, we spent quite a bit of time determining. There are a number of issues that are very complicated, and it is still a work in progress. This document is pretty self-explanatory and pretty straightforward. The basis for this guidance rests in already adopted board policy around harassment and discrimination. So this really, we're not creating any new policies. This is guidance based on policies that are already adopted. So in terms of safety and bullying, making sure that we address in a consistent manner any bullying or harassment that takes place on the basis of, and the list is there, offensive language based on non-gender identity, gender expression, stereotypes will be addressed consistently and equitably as all other types of discrimination. Names and pronouns is a challenge for a number of teachers. I know personally, sometimes I'm concentrating so hard to get it right, I make myself get it wrong. And so it's an ongoing journey. What's really crucial is teachers making that effort with the expectation clearly articulated, whether you agree or not personally, this is the student's name, this is the student's gender, respect it. The other challenge is working with substitute teachers, and we spent a lot of discussion around Skyward and names and how do we prepare that. I know at least at Lawrence High, we set the expectation that teachers need to create those rosters so that they can add the names and make sure the names are there. And so that's one workaround that we've implemented, and I know other schools are doing similar things, or they've worked around so that we can identify the students in those classrooms with their name and not a dead name pulled from Skyward. Locker rooms, bathroom facilities, this again is challenging, and I know we've been providing facilities for students. This sort of codifies the expectation that those facilities need to be provided. And there's a wide variety. Each student reacts differently in a situation, so finding a space where a student feels safe and comfortable, most students are not really comfortable in a locker room, period. So take that exponentially for somebody who is dealing with lots of other issues regarding gender identity or gender nonconformity, and it heightens the need to provide those safe spaces for students to change and participate in activities. On the backside, gender segregated activities, we've taken some kind of high profile steps to make sure that activities at the high school level don't come with those tags of male or female. And so that this just again provides guidance and leaning on CASHA for CASHA regulated activities. They already have some pretty elaborate guidelines how to make that work. And then resources, we know that this is a population that is at high risk. And so we need to make sure that we provide support for mental health needs and support as they navigate a very difficult and challenging time in any student's life. And are there any questions?
I want to add to that really quick,
Yeah.
Mark. Jose gave me brochures to bring to hand out to all of you tonight that were created by this task force, and I left them at home.
Oh.
So I apologize, and I will make sure that I will get them to you. It's a trifold brochure that basically has some resources that counselors can have in their offices. The Welcome and Enrollment Center will have it in order to just provide, this kind of language and the awareness that we are working hard to support all of our students.
Is that?
Oh, that one right there. It looks just
looks
like
like
that.
this.
Shannon got hers on her own and didn't have to rely on me.
I happen to stick it in my handbag, but we'll get copies to everybody. And these are available in the schools, and we also discussed today having them available in the enrollment center for our students and families.
I also wanted to, a lot of the time that we spent in the task force meetings, we're kind of talking about how to use our current systems, which are somewhat archaic in some ways, to help manage, like the instance that Mark talked about in terms of, a substitute, like, roll sheet or whatnot, because teachers have to modify that because Skyward doesn't have a system where that works seamlessly. That can be challenging. But with the move over to Power School, we think that there'll be a lot more flexibility to have that integrate in a way that allows that to be easier, which will certainly be helpful. And then, I appreciate you going through that. I want to point out that especially in terms of facilities, we want to make sure that our trans students, our non-binary students, and our gender non-conforming students are not made to be the people who feel as though they have to use alternative facilities in the event that someone has a concern about their presence. Anti-discrimination truly means that we provide an inclusive environment where people feel comfortable and welcome in the facilities that they want to be in, and I believe that this guidance spells it out very clearly, that if someone is uncomfortable with a trans student being in the locker room or the bathroom with them, we will provide alternative options for the uncomfortable student to use a facility that makes them feel comfortable, whether or not that be the nurse's office, single stall restroom, or some alternative option. And I think that that is a really important piece that goes along with these guidelines that ensure we are setting a bar that is very high for what we mean in terms of creating anti-discrimination like policies in our district.
And I forgot to mention during the facilities committee update that we did confirm that that as they're moving forward, that this is something that they're taking into account at the middle and secondary schools during design. Architects are already, trying to search for best practices, and they are going to engage. They're engaging this committee as part of that.
Yeah, we're not at that point yet,
Yeah,
but
but
we
when we get
discussed
to that
that was
point.
part of the
Yeah.
plan. going
Yeah,
forward.
and I hope in addition to the LGBT task force engagement, I think it's really important we engage with students in order to make sure that the facilities that we are committing to building actually meet their needs. I do think that we are moving as a society in a way that gender is going to be less important of a distinction as we go forward, just based upon the theoretical research and knowledge of what I've read. And so I think that building structures that codify that binary system that isn't working for a lot of people is not smart. And so I think that there are ways we can be adaptive in the way we build in order to just meet the needs of everybody.
I'd like to acknowledge, I did hear people with high school kids, many have reported back at the beginning of the school year that over and over in every class, they were asked, what's your preferred pronoun? That was really great strides. Jessica asked me to say something on her behalf, and I wholeheartedly agree, although I'm not sure if we actually have, are we approving guidelines? We don't have a guidelines to approve, we're just reporting on the committees.
Well, this is the committee's, we don't have a motion attached to this. So let me seek some clarification.
No, there was not a motion attached to this, there wasn't a board enclosure. This would be something that would go into our
Gap.
Guide to Administrative Practices or Procedures. So it really could be done on a voice vote. It doesn't
Okay.
have to have
Okay.
Well, Jessica asked me to share. I'm going to, no, oops, sorry, I don't have part. I am very supportive of these guidelines and feel there is an urgency for us to approve them and to get them into our buildings so staff understands the board's expectations, and I agree, obviously. So.
Okay. Other questions? I have one question, and this might be for Anna. This working group, now that we've reached this point, will it continue to meet? Is this going to become a standing committee of the nature of some of the other committees that we have?
I mean, just based on how things are constantly evolving and providing a space and place to have a group to look at things, I would recommend that it continues as a standing task force, and whether we expand it to include parents or community members, we can talk about that, but I think it should continue.
Okay, great. All right, with that, I motion to approve adding the guidelines that were presented tonight into our GAP.
Second.
So moved. Oh, sorry.
Got a so moved over here, and a second.
I'm very excited.
All right, voice vote, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very much for all of your work.
Thank you.
And my apologies again, Jose, for getting your name wrong. That's what happens when I try to ad lib. So,
And I will add, before we adjourn, we do meet with all of the building administrators, and if they're not all here tomorrow, we will be able to share this with them, and then also to share with them to make sure that they share it with their staff and teachers within the next day or so. So we'll see all administrators tomorrow, so we'll pass that along to them.
okay. All right. With that, we are concluded. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.